come to order. And this morning we are meeting to consider the nomination of Governor Martin O'Malley to be Commissioner of the Social Security Administration. Before we get to Governor O'Malley, though, I'm going to introduce the beloved Senator Barbara Mikulski. She and I served together, and she often said when we were together, and we could have been in a meeting in the other body or here, she'd often point to herself and point to me, and she would say something along the lines of, "Great to see you," to the guest. "I'm the short of it." And then she'd look up at me and go, "He's the tall of it." And I'm here to say, as we start this, and you're going to get a formal introduction in a few minutes from your senator from Maryland. Senator Mikulski, you might say I was tall and you were short, but for all of us here in the Senate, you are the giant. You are the giant. Let's give her a big round of applause. What an extraordinary record Senator Mikulski has achieved in both the Senate and the House, and we're going to hear from her momentarily. Governor O'Malley, you're going to have to try to compete with this. It's going to be a challenge, but you've had a life of public service, and you built a world-class reputation for harnessing technology to deliver transformative change in government. As mayor of Baltimore, you established the nation's first 311 call center. Very important to help people shop for services. You threw open the doors of government, and that's why none of us were surprised that the president nominated you to serve, because it's that kind of leadership that's needed at Social Security. This is a program that's a lifeline for millions of Americans. This is how I got my start in public service, as Senator Mikulski knows, when I was director of the Gray Panthers. This is an incredibly important program to help people with disabilities, surviving spouses, other Americans who earn benefits with every paycheck. Now, it's no secret that the Social Security Administration's had its share of challenges, and from long lines stretching around field offices, phone systems crashing, outdated technology and systems, and most recently, low staff morale, there have been a lot of criticisms, and a lot of colleagues here in the Senate are talking about it, and we want to make some real changes. That said, we have the power of the purse and the pen, and we can take responsibility as well for Social Security's performance and work with the person who fills the job that you have been nominated for to really get solutions to these concerns our constituents are talking about. It's not surprising that customer service and staff morale improved as funding levels rose. It's also not surprising that backlogs and wait times grew as funding levels fell. Social Security's budget has been through the ringer over the last decade. Since 2010, the budget's fallen by 17%, while the number of people who benefit has risen by 20%. So, if you look at Social Security, they are trying to do more with less money. Now, we can talk about all these numbers, but what this really means is parents and grandparents and folks with disabled children, they're waiting months, if not years, to get a decision on disability. Social Security dedicated employees get overworked, burned out. They have, based on what we've seen, leave to go work elsewhere. Every single member on this dais has talked about how important Social Security is to their constituents, and the message from this committee is don't cut benefits, and that's something I agree with. Every American who's worked their whole lives and paid into Social Security deserves, in terms of service quality, service to them. They deserve platinum level service. Well, what we've seen is with a cut to Social Security, that hasn't always been the case. Now, in addition to the agency's funding challenges, we have all our constituents coming to us with concerns that are not from Capitol hearing rooms, but from their own lives. Here's an example. I have a constituent in Albany, Oregon, who receives Social Security SSI benefits, supplemental security income benefits, because of a severe disability, and she lives in her parents' home. Although she's unable to work because of her disability, she still is paid half of her SSI benefit to her parents each month as rent. However, Social Security notified her recently that she owes the government more than $9,000 in overpaid benefits. It spans several years because Social Security determined she received a rental subsidy from her parents. That's considered income under the Social Security Act. My staff worked with her as she tried to appeal the overpayment, but so far her appeal has been denied. And the reason is the law is clear on it. So this constituent is being punished because her parents lent a helping hand to their child. Now, the agency has made notable strides to simplify SSI rules, including those related to housing support, but they're still hanging on. They're still tethered to some outdated laws. So I and several members of this committee have, on a bipartisan basis, joined Senator Brown and Senator Cassidy to champion bipartisan legislation to modernize SSI, to make it easier for the beneficiaries to work, to save, to marry, and to friggin' simplify the program and reduce these overpayments. I am very proud to be supporting this bipartisan legislation that will speak to my constituents, whether they're in Albany, Oregon, or anywhere else. And I'm going to close with this. Social Security is at an inflection point. We can keep relying on these policies from yesteryear. That's a route. Congress is good at doing that. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Or we can renew the program so that we can really achieve the kind of quality services that seniors, disabled folks, all these people walking on an economic tightrope deserve. And I believe Governor O'Malley, having spent a lot of time talking with you, having listened to Senator Mikulski talk about your background, I think you're a person who can help restore the incredible promise of Social Security. So we look forward to hearing from you. We're now going to hear from Senator Crapo, and then for the genuine regulation introduction, we will go to Senator Cardin, and then we'll hear from Senator Mikulski. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And Governor O'Malley, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for your willingness to serve. When we met, you asked me what I wanted of you, and I didn't tell you we wanted you to change all of these policy problems that we've got, because that's not your job. It wouldn't be your job as the Social Security Administrator. I asked you to make sure the trains run on time and to fix and simplify the system that can be done administratively. And I appreciate your willingness to address those kinds of issues. This nomination is long overdue, coming more than 2 years after President Biden removed the prior Senate-confirmed commissioner. And during this time, the Social Security Administration has struggled to fulfill its customer service mission. The Social Security Administration is responsible for overseeing the Social Security program, which provides more than $1 trillion in benefits to millions of seniors, individuals with disabilities, and their families every year. The SSA also administers the Supplemental Social Security Income Program, which Senator Wyden has referenced, assigns Social Security numbers, and issues Social Security cards. Given the SSA's important responsibilities, the public rightly expects the agency to provide timely and responsive service. However, SSA is not currently living up to those expectations. For fiscal year 2023, Americans waited more than 7 months on average for a disability decision at the initial level. For those denied at the initial level, they waited another 7 months at the reconsideration level and another nearly 15 months if they sought a hearing before an administrative law judge. While not all applicants will qualify for disability benefits, they all deserve to receive a decision within a reasonable period of time. The Social Security Administration must take additional steps to reduce wait times for disability decisions and address outdated disability program rules. SSA's National 800 number is one of the primary channels for seeking assistance from the agency, and it must do more to address wait times. In fiscal year 2023, callers to the National 800 number waited more than 35 minutes on average to speak with a representative, compared to approximately 13 minutes 2 years ago and around 10 minutes a decade ago. SSA should also continue improving its online services, which not only increase flexibility for beneficiaries, but also allow the agency to be more efficient with its resources. Americans rightly expect that the Social Security Administration will be a responsible steward of taxpayer funds. However, for the fiscal year 2021, the SSA issued approximately $2.49 billion in improper payments for Social Security and $4.91 billion for SSI. The agency has additional tools to prevent improper payments before they occur, and the agency should use them. Finally, while the President and Congress are tasked with ensuring Social Security's long-term solvency, the SSA plays a critical role in making sure that the administration, Congress, and the public have accurate and timely information about the program's long-term finances. This year, for the first time in over a decade, the Social Security Trustees Report was delivered to Congress by the statutory April 1st deadline. I expect a new commissioner to help ensure that the Trustees Report deadline is treated as a deadline, not a suggestion. Governor O'Malley has confirmed you will face immense challenges and a relatively short timeline to get the Social Security Administration back on track. This may all be a tall order, but the American people deserve nothing less. I look forward to hearing your testimony in response to questions today so that we can better understand how you would evaluate and address SSA's customer service challenges, what specific data you would look at to evaluate the use of telework, how you would ensure that the SSA's independent status is maintained in practice, and what would be your top areas of focus with respect to modernizing SSA's information technology. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Governor O'Malley, for being willing to take on this task.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. Now we're going to hear from Senator Mikulski, and that's because of the graciousness of your colleague from Maryland, Senator Cardin. He looked over at me and said, Senator Mikulski first. So, Senator, wonderful to have you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Cardin, thank you for your graciousness as always. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, Senator Crapo, thank you very much for inviting me to appear before the Finance Committee on the nomination of Martin O'Malley. Why am I here to testify? Well, this is my first time back in Dirksen in 5 years because of COVID and other dynamics, but I also believe when you hang it up, don't hang around. But I wanted to come here today at your invitation, Mr. Chairman, with the concurrence of the ranking member to introduce and talk about my knowledge of the nominee, Governor Martin O'Malley, and also because of the hometown pride we feel in the Social Security Administration. We in Maryland have a lot of homestay pride to have the Social Security Administration headquartered in Maryland, where it's been for 88 years since Social Security was originally passed with the work of the Congress working with a president. We have a lot of pride in this, where, as I said, first in downtown, the city of Baltimore, and now in Woodlawn. Back in the 1930s, when people were choking on the Dust Bowl or working or not working in the Rust Bowl, Americans needed a safety net, and that's when Social Security was created. For 88 years, the administration of Social Security did not miss a payment, but it's in much need of management reform. The chairman, the ranking member, others have cataloged all of the constituent delivery services that are so familiar to this committee and the due diligence you're applying to fix it. But so many Americans depend on their Social Security not only as a lifeline, but a life preserver that keeps them afloat. The challenges of the Social Security Administration are vast, but the hardworking men and women of the Social Security Administration need a strong, confirmed operational leader, and the American people need a Social Security Administration that works for them. That's why I believe that Martin O'Malley would provide the leadership and the management skills to do that. I've known Governor O'Malley personally for more than 3 decades. Actually, I knew him when he had more law books than ties. When I ran for the Senate so many years ago in 1987, I recruited then Martin O'Malley to be my field director. He was a law student. He was a brilliant organizer. He helped me win, and then I went on to govern. Martin O'Malley also chose a life of service. Service is in Governor O'Malley's DNA. His father, a strong personality who wanted service. His mother worked in constituent service for me for a number of years. His wife is a district court judge. He went to schools like Gonzaga and Catholic U that reinforced, again, the ethic of service to people and making the world a better place. So Martin O'Malley ran for the Baltimore City Council. I served there too. In Baltimore, we call it the pothole parliament because you have to really worry about the nuts and bolts of delivering service. Then he became mayor. Well, when he became mayor, people wondered whether he has a flair, a public flair, a persona. He sings, he plays the guitar, but he's also an excellent manager. So people worried, was Martin O'Malley going to be a showboat? But guess what? He turned out to be a tugboat. He actually moved the ship of state in the right direction, often pulling it against its will. He had a knack for organization, understanding the new technology and how to use technology to be data-driven, metric-assessed, to use that technology to motivate, not to castigate the employees to do a better job. Now, Governor O'Malley is not a big government guy. He's a smart government guy. He believes you use modern management tools to organize a workforce around a mission, measurable objectives, and also stay within the budget and online. In Baltimore, in the city council, we had to have a balanced budget. You couldn't just run your agency on, make-believe. When you're the governor of the state of Maryland, again, a constitutional mandate to pass a balanced budget. So the Governor O'Malley knows how to work within budgetary lines, master technology, using data, metrics, and so on, to deploy the right resources to the right people to do the job, and then really measure, guess what? Measure performance to not castigate, but to motivate. Using that, I believe, is what Social Security needs now. Social Security does need a seasoned leader, and Martin O'Malley would be one that would provide that. As I said, we take great pride in the Social Security Administration there. The workers are really overwhelmed. The technology is really dated. The facilities are pretty tired, as are often the workers. And then you outline, Mr. Chairman, and others, really what constituents are facing, and so on. So this is why I think that he brings the commitment to service, the skill set to do the job, a sense of fiscal responsibility, and an understanding that Congress makes the policy, the administrator implements it following the law and congressional intent. So I really think Governor O'Malley will do that job, and I commend him to you for your consideration and the due diligence you apply on all nominees. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Governor, what a send-off. That was Exhibit A of a complimentary and richly deserved send-off. And I will only tell you, my mother used to say after a basketball game, dear, just make sure you're out there running with the right crowd. When you are with Senator Mikulski, you are running with the right crowd. You are a lucky fella. All right, Senator Cardin.
Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo, thank you very much for holding this hearing for Governor O'Malley's nomination. And thank you for inviting back Barbara Mikulski. Team Maryland's having a reunion. Barbara was the founder and leader of Team Maryland. That's where we worked with Governor O'Malley and Mayor O'Malley, and we worked together as a team. And thank you for having Senator Mikulski back so we could all update our book on the Mikulski one-liners. You got some fresh new one-liners. We appreciate that very much, Barb.
I've had a lot of time to think about it.
So I've known Governor O'Malley. I knew him when he was a city council person and took on some incredible challenges in Baltimore City. I knew him when he was mayor of Baltimore and had a chance to see him take on some of the toughest challenges that we've ever seen, including public safety, our schools, just incredible challenges with limited resources. I've seen him as governor of Maryland, where he excelled in really bringing our state together and accomplishing so much as governor. I've known him as a friend. I've known him as a public servant. And Governor O'Malley, you were trained very well by Senator Mikulski. And we appreciate that. There's not a challenge that he'll back away from. I can tell you that personally. He'll take on any challenge. And I just want to share with you, I was at City Hall when Governor O'Malley set up CityStat. This is a novel approach I had never seen really carried out by a chief executive of a city. He had ways in which he brought his agency heads in on a regular basis with specific objectives that they needed to accomplish. It may have been to reduce the delays on some city services. It might have been to deal with the maintenance of our streets. And then on a regular basis, he had the stats to see whether they were performing as they should. That's called accountability. He held his team accountable, and the results were just incredible. I saw him with StateStat as he transitioned from the city government to the state government. He's an incredible manager, which is exactly what the Social Security Administration needs. He'll do what is necessary in order, Senator Crapo, to get the trains running on time, because that's exactly what we need to make sure happens. So let me just quote from the former mayor of Indianapolis and the current director of the Kennedy School of Government, Steve Goldsmith, what he said about Governor O'Malley. There are leaders who are charismatically rally the city, those who work well with communities, those who can manage well, and those who lead well. But what Martin O'Malley brings in person is the full complement of those skills. I think that really tells us the talent that we have before us that is willing to take on this challenge at the Social Security Administration. This is a critically important agency. 66 million Americans, 1 out of every 5 depends upon the benefits and services of the Social Security Administration, and it's personal to me because I'm one of those 66 million. So we all recognize how important this is. I want to thank you, Martin O'Malley, for being willing to take on this challenge. Thank you for your life service, public service. Thank you, Katie, and the entire family, because we know the family is in on all of this. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, that we can hear from Governor O'Malley, consider his nomination quickly, approve him so he can get to work.
Well said, Senator Cardin, and good luck, Governor, trying to match all of this. Senator Mikulski, Senator Cardin, it's been quite a beginning, and Senator Mikulski, you are always welcome. You are welcome to stay, and we know also that you have a very busy schedule teaching at Johns Hopkins, so if you need to go to your students, we understand.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Crapo, and I'd like to extend, if I could, a warm hello to my friend Senator Grassley. I didn't have a chance to greet quickly you, Senator Cornyn. Good to say hi.
Thank you, Senator Mikulski. Okay. All right, we're going to move along just as Senator Cardin recommended, and next we will hear from Governor O'Malley.
Chairman Wyden, thank you very, very much. Ranking Member Crapo, members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing. And I ask you to indulge me on a couple of really essential other thank yous. And that is thank you to Senator Ben Cardin, and also thank you to former Senator Barbara Mikulski. two of the most outstanding United States senators that our state has ever sent to Washington, and that's saying a lot because Maryland, in addition to crab cakes and football, produces outstanding United States senators. But I want to thank you both for your leadership on what you've done for America and also for the people of Maryland. I want to thank President Biden for his trust in me. And finally, I want to thank my wife, Judge Katie Kern O'Malley, and my children, Grace and Tara, and William and Jack, for their steadfast support in this challenge and indeed every call to public service that our family has answered. When I was a boy, I was taught by my parents, who were themselves children of the Depression, young people who were tested in their service in the Second World War, that the greatness of our country is found in the care and concern we show for one another, especially people who are sick, people who are elderly and living alone, people living with disabilities, children, each of them our neighbor, who would otherwise go hungry. Social Security is the most far-reaching and important act of social and economic justice that the people of the United States of America have ever enacted for one another. For tens of millions of Americans across their country, Social Security today is the difference between living with dignity or living in poverty. And for a remarkable 88 years, as Senator Mikulski mentioned, without ever missing a single benefit payment, Social Security has strived to provide the right amount to the right person at the right time, and I might add, at a massive scale. And for the longer arc of its history, Social Security has done so with a high degree of accuracy. But today, for all of its historic strengths, we must acknowledge that Social Security faces a customer service crisis. The truth is today, the Social Security Administration is serving 50% more customers and beneficiaries on the same staffing it had 20 years ago in 1995. In fact, last year was an all-time low, or a 25-year low in Social Security staffing. What does that mean? That means that today, a senior citizen who calls the 800 number of the Social Security Administration will face an average hold time of 37 long minutes. Today, an American in need of disability benefits will wait 220 days for an initial disability determination and perhaps as long as 2 years for the success of mandatory appeals. This is not the greatness of America. This is not acceptable. If someone wants a face-to-face meeting with a Social Security employee in a field office to claim their benefits, they should be able to get one. If you're a person already living with a severe disability, you shouldn't have to be dragged through 2 years of so-called due process in order to receive the benefits for which you've already spent a lifetime working. We can and we must do better as an agency and as a nation. President Biden nominated me for this position because I have the leadership skills, the management skills, and the experience needed at this moment to lead Social Security forward. As a mayor, I learned there is no Democratic or Republican way to fill a pothole. And as a governor, I learned that the biggest and toughest challenges can only be tackled with some degree of bipartisan consensus and cooperation. But as both a mayor and a governor, I developed a discipline tipped to it by smarter and far more experienced people than I developed a discipline for harnessing data and information technologies in ways that got the best out of large, siloed organizations of people that many inside and outside of government thought were too unwieldy, too slow, or too steeped in excuses to change. Despite the challenges the agency faces, I have no doubt whatsoever that the dedicated, patriotic, and hardworking men and women of the Social Security Administration of the United States of America are up to this moment, and so am I. With your consent and confirmation, it would be the honor of a lifetime to lead Social Security's outstanding public servants forward together in such an important mission, and it would be an enormous privilege and honor to be able to make sure that each of you is provided with as our nation's policymakers, the very best information you need to make the decisions necessary for the long-term sustainability and strength of Social Security. And so, with deep humility, I look forward to receiving your advice. I greatly appreciate the time that so many of you have made already to see me in your offices. And I look forward to answering your questions today and hopefully earning your consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor O'Malley. We've got some obligatory questions, and then we'll get into the questions for members. First, Governor, is there anything that you're aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Second, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, sir.
Third, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Finally, do you commit to providing a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your responses. Governor, now we're going to go to member questions. Let me tell you what's on my mind, Governor, because this is what members have asked me about your nomination. You have, through much of your adult life, held political office, mayor, governor. You are a candidate for president of the United States. This position that you have been nominated for is not about politics. It's not about politics at all. It's about service. It's about service to the millions of people that we've been talking about. How do you feel about this transition to a position that's all about service?
Well, what you just laid out was what made me excited to say yes, and I didn't hesitate for an instant. I was honored, as you mentioned, to have been able to run for office and to serve in elected office, but I was also, I can't, how do I say this? I don't miss a lot of the aspects of running for office, and I have an enormous amount of respect for all of you who nonetheless grind yourself through what's required, the time on the phone, the time balancing duties here and duties at home. What excites me about this challenge is that it's all about operations. It's all about improving customer service. And quite honestly, the aspect of having, after being a mayor and being a governor, the one piece of it that I really, truly do miss, well, there's a couple, but one that I really, truly miss is pulling people together around the data, the information, being in the center of the huddle, running plays, measuring yardage, seeing if what we're doing is actually working to improve customer service. That's what I was able to do with a dedicated group of people in the city of Baltimore, and that's what we did when I was governor. And I believe that Social Security has a much higher velocity of change that it is capable of than what we've seen so far.
Now, you get high marks for your management record. People referred that to us again and again when they said, look at the governor's record in terms of management. What do you think are your key strengths in the management area?
Senator, I would say that the key strength is, I've learned, and I've taught in a number of universities courses in public administration. An older Jesuit friend of mine said, you really don't know what you know until you try to teach it a few times. I believe some of the most important lessons I learned as a manager and the things that we put into practice involved really bringing people together in a much more regular, every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 2 week cadence of accountability and collaboration to ask one overriding question, and that is, are the things we're doing working or not? If they're working, we came back 2 weeks later to try to do more of them. If they weren't working, we shifted tactics, shifted strategies. And what I've seen across the country is a tendency that most governments have to fall into an annual cadence called budget inputs. But once you create a winnable game with a compelling scoreboard for even this is more important the larger the agency is, It's amazing how people start to lean forward, how people start to play differently, how people have a much easier time remembering what they committed to their colleagues over the last 2 weeks and what they committed to do in the next 2 weeks than they do remembering last year's budget. So that's what I learned. Bring people together every 2 weeks, measure performance, and lift up the leaders in the eyes of their peers.
I like the accountability that you've described. That's very constructive. One last question in my round. Let's talk about reducing overpayments. And I remember back in the days when I ran the legal aid program for senior citizens at home, and we saw how important it was that Social Security pay the right person the right amount at the right time. Because if you don't get that right, you've got bedlam so often in the lives of the people you're serving who are walking on economic tightrope, and they got to get the amount right because it could be rent, it could be groceries, it could be gas. And it's imperative that Social Security get this right. And there's been a real challenge in terms of the red tape and the follow-through that, frankly, is one of the things I like so much about your candidacy. For example, in 2015, a group of us, a bipartisan group, worked to pass legislation to create a data exchange that would significantly reduce overpayments for seniors and disabled folks. 8 years later, what seemed like an infinity to people who are trying to get this stuff sorted out, it is still not online. And the longer Social Security drags its feet, the more seniors and disabled folks are going to get hurt. So my question here is, if confirmed, will you give this committee, all of us will share it on a bipartisan basis, a concrete timetable on the system's implementation, and we would ask that we could have that timetable for getting it done within 30 days after you've been confirmed?
Well, of course, Senator. There are so many things I'm looking forward to throwing myself into, but I will. It breaks my heart when I hear stories like the one that you just shared from Oregon. A woman suddenly finds she has to pay $9,000 back, and this is somebody living on SSI. Timely, accurate information shared by all is the key to more effectively serving people and to higher and better collaborations.
Very good. Senator Crapo.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Governor O'Malley, I was very heartened by your opening statement. I appreciated the fact that you candidly acknowledged that the Social Security system is not where it ought to be in a number of areas. You heard me outline some of them. You outlined some of them. You've heard others today as well. And I heard you say that you feel that there's a way to get the Social Security Administration to perform at its peak and best levels. And I appreciate that. You know, today in the United States, I think that people have a feeling about government agencies in general, not just the Social Security Administration, but maybe the word government bureaucracy or symbolizes what people think, but or maybe the notion, well, that's good enough for government work, the comment you've probably heard before. This notion that we just are not getting performance from not only the Social Security Administration, but from pretty much any government bureaucratic agency today. We have concerns about every one of them not performing the tasks that they need to perform and doing them efficiently and at a high caliber standard. If you are confirmed, what would be your top areas of focus with respect to making sure that the Social Security Administration performed at that peak level that it ought to be performing at for customer service?
Yeah, Senator, I believe the top priority is for as large as Social Security is, there are lagging indicators that are pretty clear that we have to meet. But what is not as clear are the measurements on the tactics and the strategies and the actions that will drive you to the lagging indicators. In other words, people can gather around the table every month and stare at the hold times on the 800 number or the backlog and shake their heads and wag fingers, but that's not what's going to improve it. You actually measure the leading actions. And in my advice that I've provided to other mayors and governors across the country, everybody wants the dashboard on the end indicators. But what we really need are leaders that bring people together to ask the questions about whether the actions, tactics, and strategies are driving us there. That's what we need to do at Social Security, and I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. You actually anticipated my second question, because I was going to ask you, how do you measure this? How are you going to measure this and get to the objectives? I look forward to seeing how you approach this, and maybe that can be in this 30-day report that Senator Wyden asked you
Very
about
good.
to give us some ideas about that. For my last question, I'd like to talk to you about information technology investments. The Social Security Administration's information technology plays a critical role in the agency's ability to serve the public. And while the SSA has taken steps to modernize its IT, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done to reduce its reliance on legacy systems and increase online service offerings. If confirmed, what would be your top areas of focus with respect to modernizing the SSA's information technology?
Yeah, Senator, we need to bring in the best people, not only across our federal government, like at U.S. Digital Service, but we need to be open to private sector and the things they're already doing that we can learn from. I will need to do a rapid assessment of systems, the alignment of those systems, and in doing so, there are two people that are going to be forefront in my mind. The customer, so customer-centered approach. How is the customer being served? And directly related to that, what is the experience of the frontline worker? I have heard stories about SSA waiting years and years for some minimal viable product to finally roll out, only to have the workers demoralized and throw up their hands and say, this doesn't work for us. It adds more time for us. So I'm looking forward to sitting down beside those workers. One of the important things to remember as an executive is your job is not to have all the answers. Your job is to listen to the people that do, at least when it comes to the things that they do. So that's related to the technology, that is system assessments. I think it's really, really important to have a robust IV&V contractor looking over the shoulder, not somebody that's friends with the prime, but to do the independent verification and validation so that we don't have the overruns, the delays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very logical. There's not enough logic around here. Thank you. Senator Grassley's next.
When you came to my office, I wouldn't ask you any gotcha questions unless I was going to do that. So I hope these are legitimate approach to things. The Social Security Administration was reestablished as an independent agency under President Clinton. 1994, Senator Moynihan argued making the system an independent agency would help, quote, insulate the program from partisan politics. I've got three questions, but just consider them as one question. Should you be confirmed as commissioner, will you commit to keeping the SSA insulated from politics and not taking positions on political issues or initiatives? And I ask this question because your predecessor was fired for politics. So what does independent mean to you vis-a-vis your relationship with President Biden?
Senator, and I've read actually the statute that made it an independent agency. I think there's been some creative tension between Social Security being an independent agency, operating above politics, if you will, or without regard to the politics, and what the Supreme Court has said is the prerogative of any elected executive to have and appoint their own cabinet members. For my part, as I look at this duty, I believe first and foremost I have a responsibility to advocate for the agency, to advocate for the long-term health and well-being of that agency. And secondly, to make sure that each member of this committee, indeed any member of Congress, is provided with reliable data and accurate evidence so that you can make the policy while, in the words of the minority leader, I make the trains run on time.
Can I concentrate just a little bit on that last point, your relationship with the president being an independent agency, as Senator Moynihan indicated?
And Senator, that point being that, I'm certainly here because President Biden nominated me. I have known him for many years, worked with him and some of you on the Recovery and Reinvestment Act.
Well, then, in light of the fact that your predecessor was fired for politics.
Yeah, Senator, I never had met that gentleman, and I wasn't involved in the administration at that time. I received a call earlier in this year, and the White House asking me if I would be willing to take on this big challenge, and I said yes. I think others might be able to unpack more of the constitutional law and the Supreme Court rulings on those things, but I think that the head of Social Security has to realize that she or he is heading an entity that Congress intends to be independent, even if the Supreme Court says the president has his prerogatives in choosing cabinet members.
Okay. Every year, the Social Security Board of Trustees urges lawmakers to act sooner rather than later to shore up the trust fund. As commissioner, would you see as your role in addressing Social Security long-term solvency, or would that be no role whatsoever, since it's up to Congress to make the decision?
Yeah, Senator, thank you. There's an urgent crisis that we face now of customer service, but there's one over the horizon with regard to solvency. This is how I would see my role in that, and that would be to be an effective administrator, executing the will of the President of the United States and Congress, improving services to people. But one aspect of this job is making sure that you get the best numbers that you can possibly get on the policy options before you in that solvency debate. In other words, Senator Cassidy and I had some time to talk, and he used the analogy of dials. He said we need to have an evidence-based conversation about what the value of each of those dials is as we look to restore solvency. So policy, Senator, is your prerogative. I would not step on that prerogative. I will defend the agency, and most importantly, I'll make sure you get the evidence and the numbers you need to evaluate what's best for the people over the long haul.
This will be my last question. One item that's sorely in need of updating is the official jobs listing that the Social Security Administration uses to determine if there's a job in the national economy that a disability applicant is able to perform. The official job listing hasn't been updated since 1977 and includes jobs that are obsolete in today's economy while omitting positions that have arisen due to advances in technology. Before I ask my question, outside the fact that this is 47 years since it's been updated, I don't know how government could be that unreliable in keeping things updated. But as commissioner, where would updating the official job listing stand in your list of priorities?
It would be a high priority, Senator. I've read some of those stories too, people being told that they can go get a job as a SEAL killer someplace, or those other outrageous examples. If you talk to somebody like, I don't know, some of these search firms that recruit people for jobs, I'm quite sure they have a much more extensive and up-to-date list than the federal government has. And I would look forward to working with you on that. It would be a high priority.
The time of the gentleman has expired. Senator Cornyn's next.
Thank you, Governor, for being willing to take on this challenge. If your job is to make sure the trains are running on time, you think it's important for us to make sure that there's something in those cars? In other words, Senator Grassley broached the topic of solvency of Social Security. According to published reports, Social Security will become insolvent by 2033 unless Congress does something different. Medicare will become insolvent by 2031. Just to cover a few facts with you, I'm sure you're aware of all of this. Right now, our debt to GDP ratio is 100%. We spend $659 billion so far this year just on interest on the debt. $659 billion just to pay interest to the bondholders in China and Japan and elsewhere around the world. As you know, mandatory spending, which includes Social Security and Medicare, roughly is 2/3 of all federal spending. So that contributes disproportionately to the debt that I mentioned just a moment ago. Try as we may, trying to deal with this strictly in discretionary spending, which is 1/3 of that spending, including the 8% that's spent just on interest alone. We can't get there, get to a balance dealing with discretionary spending. Obviously, our goal should be to save Social Security and Medicare and not cut it. You've been in politics a while. You understand what a political football this can be. But at some point, it seems to me that people in politics need to have the courage to speak the truth about where we are and what direction we are heading when it comes to federal spending. Right now, we are debating a supplemental appropriation bill. The House is for Israel to help them defend their country against a terrorist known as Hamas. We know the president has also requested money for Ukraine, total of, I think, $106 billion in supplemental appropriation requests. The president also sent us another $50 billion domestic supplemental as well. I think you can tell the direction I'm heading here, the gist of my concerns, but unless we do something different than we have been doing, we are heading toward a disaster for the seniors that depend on Social Security and Medicare, and a disaster for our country because we won't have the financial ability to actually deal with emergencies like what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, and other places around the world. So do you agree with me that we're heading in a bad direction?
I believe the world only spins forward, and I'm an optimist, Senator. I believe that if I can address directly the Social Security aspect, I think there's some interesting things. Senator Cardin will recall the Medicare waiver that we arranged for the state of Maryland. We stopped paying the hospitals as if they were the Marriott Hotel by how many beds they could fill up, and we've saved the federal government $1 billion. But to your question about Social Security, this is the beauty of Social Security, that it is a currently funded system. In other words, when people work, they pay into it. A reserve has been built up, and those dollars are dedicated there. And if you were to look at GDP and Social Security as percentage of GDP, it's pretty much clipped along at like the 4%-ish, and is not seeing those sharp spikes, that kind of hockey stick movement that you allude to where healthcare is concerned.
Well, is it your understanding that current benefits to Social Security recipients are paid out of the trust fund, or are those financial transactions on the balance sheet of the federal government that essentially add to the national debt?
No, it's my position that it is paid by people paying into it. In other words, last year, Social Security paid out $1.24 trillion. They brought in $1.22 trillion. And then the reserve that had been built up is $2.83 trillion, so they had to tap that to make up that difference. As people anticipated in 1983 when they created some changes to extend solvency.
Do you know what the administration's plan is to save Social Security?
No, sir.
Did you talk to the president or any of his advisors about that in your discussions with him about this nomination?
Not yet, but I did read and I followed what he said in his presidential campaign. And
What did you say in your presidential campaign about Social Security?
I said,
No, the time of my colleague has expired, and as we said.
I think he was getting ready to answer my question.
yeah,
Mr.
I said similar things.
Great.
And it's in that, and Senator, I submitted, I'm not trying to be coy. I mean, it's in the Senate Finance questionnaire. One of the wonderful questions they ask of somebody that's run for office is, give us everything you've ever published or said online for the last, since you've been out of college. So I do have my position, and I highlighted that one at, the first 20 pages that were on that Senate Finance Committee. But I do have my, my position there, and the president's pretty well known, I think, on his position on solvency.
The time of my colleague has expired. I would just say to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, there was a reason that I asked the first question the way I asked it, because this is not a position where you're supposed to do politics. You're supposed to do service. And
You said
overpayments-
politics? Were you suggesting my questions had to do with politics
I'm
as
not
opposed
s-
to policy?
I'm not saying anything other than there was a reason I asked my question the way I
Oh,
did.
Mr.
and
Chairman,
was
I don't
pleased.
accept the fact that you try to censor members of the Senate
didn't censor-
asking questions of witnesses in
Not
a
only-
nomination hearing.
Not only did I not censor
I
my
was trying to be
colleague,
respectful of the governor, and I'm confident he will do a good job. I just hope still has a trust fund to administer.
not only did I not censor my colleague, I allowed him extra time to ask his questions. Senator Cardin, you're next.
Senator Cantwell's here.
Excuse me, Senator Cantwell, we missed you. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair Wyden, and congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you, Senator.
We had a chance to discuss a couple of issues about Social Security in my office, but one of those was about change CPI and the notion that sometimes people think that a change to the formula isn't a decrease in benefits. And so where are you on change CPI?
I believe that was a policy question asked and answered, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that you and Senator Mikulski were both leaders in rejecting that because it would diminish and weaken Social Security rather than strengthen it for so many people.
Well, 1.4 million people in Washington State, or 18% of our population, rely on these Social Security benefits. And I opposed in 2013 switching to that index calculation because it would reduce the annual cost of living for our seniors. And so various times, various administrations come in and try to propose this, and I want to make sure that I'm on the record making sure that that's not something that you would be for.
That's
So,
true.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. And you prioritize financial responsibility during your time as Maryland governor. What approach do you think we need to continue to focus on here? And you mentioned the communication to just getting the phones answered and making sure that we deliver on service. Could you expound on that?
Sure, Senator, thank you. Social Security is an organization that is steeped in tradition, very large, serves people on a massive scale. They also happen to have some of the best data and information that other partner agencies, interagencies, as well as thousands of people need to ping off that data in order to do their business. What Social Security has need of is a common operating platform that allows everybody to see what's happening in the organization. Right now, if you look at their org chart, it is massive and it is extremely siloed. And the key to collaboration and improving customer service, as well as efficiency, as well as staying on budget, is to break ourselves out of 240 years of tradition that says, that's my data, that's my budget, or information is to be hoarded, and instead realize that you need to share information openly and transparently. We need to measure performance. We need to understand what's happening where, whether we're on track or not, who's doing it well and who's not doing it well. So I think there's enormous opportunities. Part of it is cultural. I don't think it's primarily technology. I think it's many years of being adverse to risk and many years of accepting the wisdom that we don't share things unless we're forced to.
So your point, though, is about efficiency, is about making sure that Social Security does a better job at answering the phones, connecting with people about questions, and resolving problems. Is that right?
That's right. That's the North Star. We have to improve customer service.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing what technology upgrades you have in mind for that, but we certainly agree with that. And obviously, all our offices deal with Social Security issues, and if you think about it, we're dealing with the issues that you haven't dealt with, more or less. So we would definitely appreciate understanding what upgrades you think are necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
And so the nominee knows there is nobody on this committee who knows more about technology than Senator Cantwell. So you'll want to work with her. Senator Cardin, you are next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just really want to underscore the point that Governor O'Malley's strength is in his ability to administrate. And in response to Senator Cornyn's inquiry, I'd be interested in reading your answer to that questionnaire, because I know how frank you've been over your career. It's going to be an interesting read. Let me talk a little bit about the challenges. To me, it's similar to being mayor of Baltimore in that the challenges are great, the resources are limited. There's things that you're not going to be able to control. One is whether we pass a budget on time, whether you're operating under CR, whether you deal with government shutdowns, whether you deal with adequate resources. These are issues that you have to deal with, and they're not easy to explain to your workforce. You mentioned the workforce in response to one of the questions, I think, from Senator Crapo-Grassley. The Social Security Administration was ranked the second best place to work a decade ago for an agency that size. It's now dead last. The morale is terrible. So you have a challenge to get the confidence of your workforce, recognizing the challenges of implementing policies without the resources that, in some cases, as you point out, the workforce is wondering what we're doing. So tell me a little bit about your experiences as a mayor, how you were able, because the workforce working for Baltimore at that time had real challenges as to whether they were being appreciated. How do you restore the morale of the workforce so that you can meet the goals that you set for yourself on the service levels that are critically important to meet? Tell me a little bit about how you will go about working with the workforce to improve their spirit that they're being appreciated and a part of the team.
Yeah, Senator, thank you. It is remarkable that an agency that would have been #1 in employee morale would be dead last in such a short period of time. One of the important, that you mentioned about external events, what I might call the whirlwind, always outside, howling at the door. That was certainly true when I was elected mayor of Baltimore, and yet running to the scene of every fire, responding to the issue of the day or the shortcoming of the day, the scandal of the day, whatever it is, that doesn't move the ball down the field. What we learned to do, and what was extremely important to do for employee morale, was to tell people that they actually can achieve, and to start measuring performance not once a year as part of the inputs of a budget, but every 2 weeks. And it's amazing. I mean, even if you've ever seen a small group of kids on a soccer field, they play differently once you start keeping score. Not in a punitive way, but in a way that creates a winnable game for those employees. I've read so many stories about the numbers of employees at Social Security that are now, that report workplace stress, people at Social Security, that so many that have gone to seek, professional help because of the anxiety and the stress they deal with. Sadly, some who have friends who committed suicide, they believe, in part because of the stress they experience at work. If at Social Security we can create routines and disciplines where we regularly, when I say we, I mean all of those in a leadership position in the center of that big organization, regularly listen to the workers on the front lines, we're going to get a lot of good ideas about things that we can improve. And when people are actually listened to, when their word is respected, when their experience is respected, and we create a winnable game, it has been my experience, as it was in Baltimore, that people rise to the occasion. I mean, we declared a 48-hour pothole guarantee shortly after I was elected mayor. And people were like, oh, you shouldn't do that. They'll never hit it. But we already knew they were hitting it in 55 hours. And when they saw it publicly, those men and women on those work crews rose to the occasion, and they did it. Small things done well make bigger things possible. And one of the things the Jesuits taught me at Gonzaga is that expectations become behavior.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank my colleague, Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much. And Governor, we're honored that you're willing to continue your public service. And I'll begin where you left off with the Jesuits. They taught us a lot, and one of the things they taught us was to try to live your life for others and try to be, as best you can, a servant leader. And you've been both a servant leader and someone who's worked to lift up others. I'll tell you, I've been here a good while. I'm not sure, in the two statements by my current colleague, Senator Cardin, and my former colleague, Senator Mikulski, that's about as close to a canonization as I've heard in this room. So we're grateful for all of that. I wanted to talk about supplemental security income and so-called SSI and what that means for people. We just had a field hearing in Pennsylvania in the southeastern corner of our state. And one woman, instead of running through the policy of SSI, just told us what it means to her. Here's what she said. She's from York, Pennsylvania. She said, "This monthly benefit, quote, helps me pay my rent, it helps me get transportation to work, and it helps me pay for my groceries and things I need," unquote. Simple as that. That's what it's about, and you know that. We know that there are almost 5 million people with disabilities who are SSI recipients. A huge number of those in Pennsylvania, more than 300,000, receiving both the needed cash benefits as well as the essential Medicaid health care coverage. One of the requirements for eligibility for SSI is an asset limit of $2,000 per person. That locks people into poverty, that asset limit. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the $2,000 asset limit established in '84 is now worth $662. $662, not $2,000, 1/3 of what it was then. The chairman, Senator Wyden, and I, and Senator Brown of Ohio have worked to increase the asset limit. So that's the reality now. We're trying to increase that. But in the meantime, one thing we can do to help here is to use an existing opportunity for people that they may not know about. These are called ABLE accounts. It's a result of a law I passed years ago. It's basically a 529 plan for people with disabilities. If you had a child who had a disability and her sister didn't have a disability and saving for college, there was no way for the child with a disability to save for her disability. Totally unfair. We changed that. The problem is we don't have enough people that know about it. So here's what I wanted to ask you. And it's about 150,000 people now that have these accounts. That's the good news. We need to make that bigger. If you can work with me, and I hope you can, to prioritize working with SSA employees to learn more about ABLE accounts and then to ensure that they systematically inform SSI recipients about the benefits of opening an ABLE account. Can you work with me on that?
Absolutely, Senator. And I've been learning more every day about this agency and the ABLE accounts that you pioneered, and I'm looking forward to working with you on that and improving it. It's that interaction between the applicants and the people at SSA. I think, there's not a gigantic budget for doing television commercials, but each of those conversations is an opportunity.
Yep, thank you. And also on a related issue, the applications for SSI benefits to children with disabilities has been falling in the last decade. It's gone from about 1.4 million to 1 million, as you know. Tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of children with disabilities are not receiving services and benefits simply because they haven't applied. There have been reports of SSI recipients who have had their benefits incorrectly reduced or suspended altogether because they received COVID-19 relief payments, which has put some beneficiaries over the $2,000 asset limit I mentioned earlier. I'm concerned that individuals eligible for SSI are not receiving the benefits they're entitled to, and I've raised this issue along with Senator Wyden and Senator Brown. Will you commit to working with us to fully address the problem of under-enrollment and remove the barriers to SSI benefits for children with disabilities?
Yes, Senator, I will. I know that one of the strategic goals that the agency has been following is about making sure, more outreach is done to traditionally underserved groups. But we need to figure out why it is that with needs rising, so many fewer children are applying.
Yep. And finally, and I'm done after this, some Americans who lost their SSI benefits due to COVID-19 relief payments or are now receiving overpayment notices.
That's an outrage.
And we look forward to working with you to correct that.
Yes, as do I, Senator.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
We're now in a situation, Senator Mikulski remembers very well, of having multiple votes, and senators are going to kind of be like trolley cars. We're going to be coming in and out and back and forth. Senator Menendez is next. Then would be Senator Whitehouse, assuming that someone else doesn't come ahead of him. But we hope we can get both of them in now. Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, according to the Social Security Administration Inspector General, during fiscal year 22, the agency clawed back $4.7 billion of overpayments, while another $21.6 billion remain outstanding. Now, my office has heard from constituents who rely on Social Security and have received letters demanding money back for overpayments made by the agency. Beneficiaries are receiving letters stating that they must pay back thousands, or in some cases even tens of thousands of dollars to the government. Some individuals are even receiving bills from SSA that date back 40 years. Overpayments push already struggling beneficiaries even deeper into poverty and hardship, which is directly counterproductive to the goals of the program. So first, we have to address the root cause of this issue. If confirmed, do you commit to improving payment accuracy?
Yes, sir. Yes, Senator, I do. It's been, as I've read those stories about people in danger of losing their homes or other financial catastrophes, it's heartbreaking, and it reminds me of a sad truth that sometimes in government, federal, state, and local, there are only two speeds, on and off. We have to do a better job of recognizing the justice at stake in each of these individual cases and come back to all of you if indeed there needs to be a change in the law.
Thank you. If beneficiaries believe that an overpayment wasn't their fault and that paying the money back would cause hardship, they can ask SSA to waive repayment. But trying to resolve an overpayment involves plunging into a nightmarish minefield, a process that can last years, drain beneficiaries of their assets, and leave them without payments for extended periods of time. Would you commit to making the appeals process more equitable and accessible for beneficiaries?
Yes, Senator, and that's another big aspect of the customer service.
Rules for beneficiaries are complex and hard to follow. Members of the public often struggle to really understand what they're supposed to report. I understand the administration is developing, Social Security Administration is developing a program to tap payroll data from outside sources and that this information can be used to automatically adjust the amounts paid to beneficiaries. That project was authorized by Congress nearly 8 years ago. Can you commit to making this a priority upon your confirmation?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And let me just turn to two other questions. SSA is at its lowest staffing level in over 25 years. Some individuals are even receiving bills from SSA, as I mentioned before, that date back 40 years. New workers need a long time to get up to speed, and complex rules for employees and create trouble for beneficiary and employees alike. Are you committed to rebuilding a robust workforce equipped to handle these challenges?
Yes, Senator.
And we need to be a partner with you in that regard.
I will regularly update this committee, and I look forward to partnering with you as well. Last year, SSA had a record number of like 8,000 that they hired, but the attrition rate, just carved into that. So we're going to have to do a better job of recruiting. We're going to have to do a better job of training and a better job of retaining people rather than demoralizing and making people miserable.
Agreed. A final question, a topic that is frequently overlooked, which is why I bring it up, when we talk about Social Security, is just how much undocumented immigrant workers contribute without receiving any benefits. Numerous studies have confirmed that through paying payroll taxes, undocumented workers contribute billions into Social Security funds each year. For example, in 2016 alone, undocumented workers contributed approximately $13 billion into Social Security funds, and again did not receive a single dime in benefits after paying into the system. Given that payroll taxes account for the lion's share of Social Security payouts each year, we simply can't discuss the future of Social Security without also talking about our immigration system. Governor, do you agree with a large body of studies showing that the contributions of undocumented immigrant workers have been essential to keeping our Social Security funds solvent?
They've certainly been a very important piece of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank my colleague, Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Chairman, and welcome, Governor. I'm delighted to see you here. I think you're a virtually ideal nominee for this position, but what made my day was not you being here, but Senator Mikulski, Chairman Mikulski being here, who I adore, have occasionally been very frightened of, but have always admired, and to have her back here in the Senate, where she was such a commanding and effective presence, has been an absolute joy, has made my day. Two things. First, I think America saw the State of the Union speech where the president called out certain Republicans who had called for Social Security and Medicare cuts. And as you'll recall, there was a fairly boisterous reaction in the chamber to that, culminating in a full-on standing ovation for the proposition that there would not be Social Security or Medicare cuts. So great, except that that commitment seems to be getting a little spongy in that in the House, Social Security and Medicare cuts were brought up in the battle over the speaker as something that Republicans wanted to see in the new speaker, somebody who'd take on Social Security and Medicare. So we'll see how that goes, but let's presume that what the president called the unanimity that there would not be Social Security cuts or Medicare cuts holds. That then means that to make Social Security solvent, we've got to address the revenues side. That's essentially arithmetic. Are you willing to help us as we design revenue side reinforcements for Social Security to give us advice and information so that we can do the best job of that?
Yes, Senator. In fact, I think that's my primary responsibility, not to make the policy, but to make sure that you have, as the policy makers, an evidence-based discussion based on the best data and information from Social Security. And the very talented people there, like Dr. Steve Goss and others with the actuary. So that's how I look at my role.
Good. The other thing we've seen recently has been a very significant funding boost for the Internal Revenue Service.
And that has manifested in the last meeting I had with the Rhode Island Taxpayer Advocate Office in a lot of better response to individual taxpayers. Where the taxpayer advocate was going to the main IRS office and having weeks, even months of delays getting cases addressed, even as the actual taxpayer advocate, now those time periods have shortened dramatically. The taxpayer advocate is turning over consumer cases more rapidly and effectively, and the public is getting its questions answered and its problems resolved far faster and more effectively than they were beforehand. And I would urge you to look at that as a potential model for what could take place within the administrative side of Social Security. And I think there are a lot of us here who would love to see additional resources come to you in the very same way that we sent additional resources to the IRS, so that the American people, who the IRS and Social Security are designed to serve, can get quick, real, effective answers and not get stuck up in backlogs and delays from understaffing and under-resourcing. So consider that as a model that has worked. Continue to look at it to see if it continues to work.
Appreciate that.
And know that some of us would love to help you be able to deliver the same results.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank my colleague, Senator Brown, a longtime advocate for these essential issues.
Much. Governor O'Malley, thank you for your willingness to serve in this position. Thank you for your commitment and your lifelong commitment, but your commitment to change the culture at Social Security. And I know I stand with the chair on the importance of that, so thank you. Social Security, we all understand, is a solemn promise to the American people. People who have paid into it all their lives deserve to know their government will protect that promise. I hear some in this body talk about privatization. I appreciate your standing strong against that. I want to ask about a concern we've heard about in that's Social Security overpayments to SSI beneficiaries. Senator Wyden and Senator Casey and I sent a letter last month to the acting commissioner asking why so many people received overpayment notices and that what SSA will do to fix it. Ohioans shouldn't pay the price for the government's mistakes. I look forward to response in that in writing. Part of your job will be to administer benefits accurately and efficiently. I know there's interest from both parties in this committee to work together to address the root causes of overpayments. SSA has noted in previous reports that the leading cause is the SSI asset limit, which has not been updated, as you know, since 1984. Am I correct in understanding this outdated asset limit is, in fact, the leading cause of overpayments?
It's a leading cause, and it's a huge administrative burden.
Okay, well, thank you, and you will fix it. I'm working with Senator Cassidy on a bipartisan bill called, as you know, as we've talked about, the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. It would increase these asset limits. It would stop denying Americans the ability to save money. The chair and I worked together on this at an announcement. It would allow people keep their own bank accounts, have control over their futures. Wyden, Casey, Langford, 4 members of this committee, all are joining us. This 40-year-old asset limit causes errors. It's difficult to administer. It represents only 4% of total benefits, but it requires 30% of your administrative budget. Am I correct in understanding that updating the asset limit for inflation would reduce, first raising it, updating for inflation, would reduce the costly and burdensome workload for SSI and free up valuable resources for other work?
From what I've read and talking to experts on this and people who have studied it all their lives, there seems to be a pretty widespread belief that bicameral and bipartisan leadership of yours would absolutely not only be the right thing to do for the recipients, the right policy, but would also reduce the huge administrative burden that Social Security has to go through without any really good reason. As you know, it wasn't indexed back then, and so, yeah, I applaud you for that bill, and Senator Cassidy and the other members of the Senate who seem to, on some of these Social Security issues, really be striking that sort of can-do, cooperative spirit that all of us like to see here in our nation's capital.
Thank you, Governor. And as you point out, as we've all pointed out, it's been 40 years. Next question is about the SSI application. Current application is 23 pages long, full of complex legalese and requires mounds of supporting documents. The worst part is that in the year 2023, it cannot be completed online. It's obvious that and critical that we ensure that only people who are eligible actually receive benefits, but anyone who has interacted with that system will tell you it's way too complicated for any one person to navigate. You shouldn't need a law degree to successfully get SSI. What steps will you take to simplify and streamline that application process to ensure that it's accessible to people who are eligible?
Yes, Senator, thank you. One of the top orders of business will be to understand that process and understand it from the standpoint of the customer, the person, the beneficiary. I can foresee, kind of side-by-side lists of things that could be done through regulation, things that can be done with changes in management, things that could be done better in terms of submission of documentation, and some things, if they require a change in law, I will not hesitate to come back to you and others who are so interested in this really important issue. So it would be a high priority, and I look forward to working with you and your able staff on this.
Thank you, Governor. And again, I'm thrilled that you agreed to take this job. I know you've had a lifelong career in public service that leads me to think, one, you know what you're doing, you can make things happen, and your empathy for others is front and center, and that's what we need in the Social Security Administrator. So it's one more thing, it's important, just a comment, it's important to remember that eligibility doesn't always guarantee access.
That's right.
And that millions of Americans are eligible, tens of millions of Americans, tens and tens of millions of Americans, not all of them have access. Your job is to close that gap. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, Senator Young, you are next.
Thanks for being here today, Governor. I really appreciate your presence. I'm grateful for the service you've given to the public. Governor, I shared these concerns with you when we met a couple of months ago, but to be frank, I'm deeply troubled with the Biden administration's action to remove the previous Social Security Administration Commissioner, Andrew Saul, from office in order to appoint someone who more closely aligns with President Biden's political ideology. This is the sort of smash-mouth politics that, when campaigning for President Biden, more than intimated that he would not engage in, and it undermines trust among at least half of America in how our government is run. So I plan to spend my time today, I think you'll find blessedly, understanding what your priorities for the SSA would be if you're confirmed, but I want to be upfront that I do have serious concerns about the way in which that situation was handled, how you were nominated, and the implications it has for the ability of the Social Security Administration to administer benefits going forward when the agency is subjected to this type of politicization. So moving on, as you're no doubt aware, Governor, the Social Security Administration has struggled to retain and to hire the appropriate workforce. Additionally, the administration has had some challenges getting individuals to return to the office. A recent testimony released by the agency highlights that most field office employees report on-site at least 3 days a week. However, my office has repeatedly heard from constituents who are unable to receive the in-person help that's necessary to address their outstanding casework issues. So, Governor, what are your views on telework as it applies to SSA and its workforce?
It's my views on telework. I mean, overall, public sector, private sector, ever since the pandemic, when we were all told suddenly go home and do your best to work from home, that sort of adversity put stresses on a lot of organizations. Fortunately, for some aspects of SSA, they had already been piloting some telework, but it was it threw a huge challenge up for administrators. The main test for whether we have staffing right in the field offices is whether people who want face-to-face meetings can get them. I don't believe it's all about the telework. Although, I don't think anybody in the private sector would tell you that they feel like they've gotten it quite right yet either. So we need to strive for that balance, with the test being that people can get meetings. I mean, for example, in your state, you've suffered a 22% loss in SSA staff in Indiana. So whether somebody's going to an office in Fort Wayne or Indianapolis, that's like 1 out of 5 people just aren't there. It's not about them teleworking, they aren't filled. Similarly, in your disability determination, we bemoan the long time that takes, but you've seen an erosion of about 20% in your state's DDS, those state employees that are reimbursed by the federal government. So we need to do 3 things all at once as we assess this. With that North Star of people being able to get meetings face-to-face when they need them, we need to strike a better balance. We need to hire more people more quickly. We need to retain the people we have, and we need to speed up a few other things like training as well.
Have you established some goals, some metrics? For example, we should retain people for certain average amounts of time, benchmarked against previous terms of service. People should be able to land an in-person appointment within X or Y days of requesting one during different times of the year. Do you have some metrics laid out for this?
I have some in my imagination, but I haven't quite, because I'm not there, I can't do more than read a lot of the public documents.
But this is something I
But
presume.
that's where we would go. I
Okay.
found in
Okay.
leading a state and leading a city, the best ideas in terms of leading actions, tactics, strategies came from listening to the people repeatedly who are on the front lines doing that work. But that's what we'll get. The lagging indicators, I think, are pretty clear. I mean, we've rattled off today how long it takes to get a disability determination, and people being on hold for 37 minutes to get their phone answered are clearly 2 high opportunity targets for us to improve.
Disability, a major issue for my constituents. I'll submit a question for the record because I know I have colleagues waiting about the amount of time. I have constituents from Greensburg, Indiana in particular, who've had some challenges. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
I thank my colleague. Just a quick point, and the senator from Indiana knows that I always very much enjoy working with him on this point with respect to the right to name an individual. We can give you all the Supreme Court cases on this, and there have been 2, and the court has decided, in effect, whether you like somebody or dislike somebody in this position, the president has the ability to nominate the person they want. And I will share with colleagues on both sides of the aisle the cases. Senator Hassan.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member Crapo. Thank you both for the hearing. Governor, it's good to see you. Thank you for your interest in this position. Thank your family, too, for supporting you throughout a distinguished career in public service. I'm going to ask you about something you've already been asked about, because it's really important to my state, my constituents. I am deeply concerned about the burden placed on individuals when the Social Security Administration works to recoup payments that the agency made because of its own errors. So it obviously can cause real financial harm to beneficiary. We have constituents who are reaching out all the time to share that they're struggling to make ends meet because SSA has unexpectedly and drastically reduced their benefits, sometimes by hundreds of dollars a month, as the agency works to recoup overpayments. And sometimes they're working to recoup overpayments, and they're in error about the need to do that. It's their own mistake. So if confirmed, will you commit, Governor, to continuing efforts to minimize the agency errors that lead to these problems for beneficiaries, including my constituents in the Granite State?
I will certainly commit to that, Senator, but it's been heartbreaking reading some of these stories of people through no fault of their own face what in essence looks like a mandated collection agency without regard to the equities and what people are facing. So I will absolutely prioritize that and look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you. Earlier this year, the Washington Post reported that federal judges are seeing an alarming rate of agency error in the Social Security disability benefits determination process. According to agency data, federal judges have found agency error in nearly 6 in 10 disability benefit cases brought before them for appeal, and that's obviously unacceptable. Because of agency errors, vulnerable individuals who are unable to work unnecessarily face delayed benefits, and some incur really costly legal fees as they navigate the appeals process. So how will you work to improve the disability benefits determination process, and will you work to fix the high error rate if confirmed?
Yeah, in a nutshell, there's a lot that can be learned about those opinions that happen at the very end of that big funnel. There are fewer people that make it to a federal court. Some accept a denial at the first level, but others appeal and it can go on forever. What we need to do a better job of doing is creating a feedback loop between those adjudications and the training lessons that can emerge from identifying patterns and repeated situations instead of just shrugging our shoulders that there's nothing we can do about it.
Thank you. One of my priorities as chair of the Emerging Threats and Spending Oversight Committee is reducing federal agencies' reliance on really costly and aging technology. So I'm pleased by the SSA's steady progress to eliminate some of its outdated technologies to save taxpayer dollars and better serve beneficiaries. How will you continue this progress and leverage technology modernization to improve customer experience at the Social Security Administration?
Yep, Senator, thank you. The Social Security Administration serves is such a large entity, and yet they tend to be somewhat, in my reading, and from what little I know, they tend to be somewhat insular in their approach to technology. So I plan on, if I'm fortunate enough to earn the trust and be confirmed, I plan to open that up more and especially bring in some of the top people we have in our own federal government, for starters, from United States Digital Service, do a systems assessment, and also listen, talk with the workers that actually have to depend on these systems. And some of them, as they've told you as well, they have to shift between closing down and opening up 16 different screens in order to do their job. Shouldn't be that way. So we're going to bring in people from U.S. Digital Service. We're going to do a top-to-bottom review, and we're most importantly going to put the customer in the center of the equation and listen to our workers.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would just make the point to you and to my colleagues that one of our challenges in modernizing IT throughout federal government is that the urgent always crowds out the important in some of these situations, and we really need to not only invest money but make it a priority across agencies, and I look forward to working with you on that.
And I'm with you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Governor, welcome. We appreciate that you're here.
Thank you.
First thing,
And thank you for our time on the phone. I know that's
absolutely.
a stressful time in the world and in the nation.
Well, it's a busy time, but every day's a busy time. Looking back through your experiences and your career, what do you think is the most relevant piece of experience you have that you will transfer into leading the SSA?
I believe the most relevant piece is my ability to apply principles of performance management in ways that improve customer service and also build up employee morale. So it's really about my experience as a manager, and in particular, performance management applied to large organizations.
I appreciate that. Talk to me a little bit. You know, you've got 60,000 employees over there. The agency obviously needs to go through some reform and right-sizing and making certain that you have people, the right people in the right seats,
places.
Basically. We need to make certain that seniors who have a question can get to somebody to talk to. So how are you going to handle those personnel issues? And then following on to what Senator Hassan said with IT and the management there, the cybersecurity, the data security, so that people know their data is not going to be compromised or hit. We've had an issue with some data breaches in federal government databases. And I look at that all as one thing, the human capital, the technology for them to appropriately you. So talk a little bit about your approach there.
Sure. SSA underwent a big effort to hire last year with your authorizations, and they actually did hire more people in 1 year than they ever had before. It was decentralized rather than centralized, and that was a good thing, except that they lost a lot of people by attrition. So we have to amp up those efforts. In terms of leadership and making sure the right people are in the right places, people are going to self-select. Once we create a winnable game, we have clear goals, we have strategies and tactics that we start measuring every 2 weeks, the leaders will rise. In my experience, I saw that happen in a very moribund bureaucracy in 1999 in the municipality, and I saw the same thing across a state government. Finally, on the issue of technology, one of the things we haven't talked on too much today yet, but that you are alluding to, is fraud in the sense of identity theft. There are many aspects of fraud. Sometimes it can be bribing a Social Security employee. Sometimes it can be a representative taking money from their charge in Nashville or any other city. But there's a real need to not think of these as separate silos, but to integrate the fraud detection and the cybersecurity to more readily and quickly identify the anomalies and patterns, before a movie producer does.
Well, you're precise on that, and that is why some of us have been pushing for an online consumer privacy bill, that front-facing part that consumers are going to deal with on the privacy, on that access issue, but then also on the back-facing when you're looking at the cyber issues and detecting those breaches. One other question I had for you, you've got the solvency issue, 2034, the fund runs out. The trustees have been very upfront about this. So what is your first step plan to addressing the solvency, because it has not been addressed?
That's right. And Senator, you and I spoke about this a little bit. I would hope, I would hope in the months ahead we talk about it more. I would never tread on the trust that the people have given you to be the policymaker. Having said that, I do believe I can help raise the level of trust in the country by raising customer service. And secondly, the quality of the customer service. How are your constituents going to support you in making tough decisions about solvency, or all of you together, if their phone calls don't get answered?
That's right.
But secondly, the agency has a responsibility to make sure that you get answers to your questions in terms of what the dials of those policy levers are worth. How much is, if we made this change, if we made that change, what does that do for solvency? What is the impact of another policy considered? And that's what I have to focus on for all of you. As Senator Cassidy said to me, we need to have an evidence-based discussion about the realities and what each of the values of these various dials
That's exactly right, and we'll depend on you for that. My time has expired. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. I want to thank both Chair Wyden and Ranking Member Crapo for this conversation today. Most importantly, I want to thank you, Governor, for your willingness to step up and serve in this important position. I also thank you for the opportunity to sit down with you and talk with you.
Yes, thank you.
Great to see your family here. It's wonderful. We're almost done. Everybody can go get some lunch. But let me just say this. I've been listening to my colleagues. Of course, in Nevada, there's over 570,000 Nevadans who get benefits from Social Security, right? Customer service is key. What I hear from you today is that you're committed to ensuring that you're improving upon and fixing and addressing some of the customer service concerns that we're all hearing in our states and going to make it a priority. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I also hear today, and I heard Senator Mikulski speak very, very highly of you. A couple of things I picked out, though, which you just addressed, was you do have a history of using performance management and customer service technologies to improve government function as it connects with constituents, correct?
That's true. Customer service, performance management, they've been kind of wishbone offensive service in any of my executive tours of duty.
Thank you. And then I also picked up on Senator Young, and I think Senator Brown mentioned this as well, people with disabilities. In Nevada, including in my own family, there are challenges with getting the benefits in a timely fashion, and it shouldn't be that hard.
Right.
It shouldn't be that complex for individuals to reach out to that system and receive that support in a timely way. It matters when you're disabled and you need that help. So if confirmed, can I get your commitment to work to ensure that families can access their SSI benefits without having to navigate those burdensome and overly complex enrollment processes?
SDI, SSI, all of those, both, and yes, Senator, you have my commitment.
Thank you. And then, like my colleagues, again, I think we all are concerned about ensuring the integrity of the trust fund, Social Security Trust Fund, long-term, beyond 2033. I also know that part of ensuring and safeguarding it is to address some fraud, waste, and abuse that will happen, and that's where you'll come in. Can you talk a little bit about it? You were talking about with Senator Blackburn about both the fraud, cybersecurity. What's your thoughts there, and how we can safeguard that fund from any type of that, either that fraud or the waste?
There's a enormous amount of information that Social Security has, that Social Security collects. I'm not talking just about individual Social Security numbers and earnings and the way we're able to share that with, thousands and thousands of other people, banks, voter registration, and other folks. But if we can take that information and turn it into a dynamic picture that all of us can see, one is better able to get in front of emerging anomalies that could lead investigators to discover fraud, to discover abuse. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we go after waste, fraud, and abuse, there's a sense that, well, you put it over there in that department or with that IG, and you hope that it doesn't make any embarrassing headlines. But if in creating an operational picture that everybody can see, and yes, on a map, you can start to look at things like, why is it that in that particular hearing office, there you're seeing an emerging hot spot of, let's say, a wait time? Or why are you seeing such a dramatic speed that doesn't exist anywhere else? Is that waste, fraud, or abuse? Is that an extremely talented person? Is something else going on? So it's the ability to have the eyes for fraud and waste and abuse at that operational table, not long after the fact that somebody's received an anonymous tip on the tip line, but to see those emerging patterns that should alert any investigator to get on that right away. I think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, if you will, to be identified.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then finally, it's not something that you have control over, but I would hope we all continue to push for Senator Brown's Social Security Fairness Act. It repeals the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. It is it really is crazy to me that we have workers in our communities who have earned these benefits and then lose out on them because they of some sort of pension offset. They've earned it. They're entitled to the fund. So I'm hopeful that we can get that legislation passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Daines.
Senator Crapo, thank you. Governor O'Malley, good to see you. I enjoyed our conversation we had back in September on the phone.
Yeah. Thank you for making the time for me.
Absolutely.
And you have a beautiful state.
I agree with you. I want to read a quote. Today, Social Security is strong, but by 2032, the trust fund will be exhausted, and Social Security will be unable to pay the full benefits older Americans have been promised, end quote. Now, one might think that quote came from the CBO last week, last month. Maybe it came from the Social Security Administration study recently. That quote is 24 years old. In fact, I'm quoting President Bill Clinton's 1999 State of the Union speech. Unfortunately, we are still on track toward that same projection more than 2 decades after President Clinton made those remarks. Earlier this summer, the CBO published their long-term projections and the Social Security Trust Fund's financial outlook, and I think calling the outlook bleak is probably optimistic. We're just 10 years away from insolvency. By 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund will be depleted and unable to pay out full benefits. This means there'll be an immediate cut to Social Security benefits across the board in 10 years unless Congress acts. And it's not just individuals in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s facing these benefit cuts once they hit retirement age. Today, if you're 57 years old, when it comes time to receive your Social Security benefits at 67, you'll get a check 25% less than what you've earned. These cuts don't take into account need, age, income level. Every single individual receiving Social Security will have a guaranteed benefit cut, no matter their circumstances. Establishing the Social Security Administration as an independent agency was designed to restore public trust. But I can tell you, speaking on behalf of Montanans, they've never been less certain about the future of Social Security and their benefits. Governor, if you're confirmed as commissioner, what steps will you take to restore the public trust in this program and build some bipartisan consensus? Because we all know up here this is going to have to be a bipartisan exercise towards the reforms needed to save and, better yet, strengthen Social Security for my children, grandchildren, and frankly, my peers.
Well, Senator, you've articulated the challenges facing us very, very well. The one aspect of restoring trust in the general public, people in Montana, people waiting for a disability determination from an office that's seen a 30% reduction in staff, is to do a better job on answering the phone and providing those determinations in a more timely fashion. And that's where I'm going to be throwing the vast majority of my daily energies. But the other big crisis is that crisis of solvency. And we're fortunate in the Senate that there seems to be a spirit still alive for what might be called that spirit of moderation, that understanding that the toughest problems require some coming together. We've seen that with Senator Cassidy's bill, with Sherrod Brown about raising the asset limits. And so I see my job as supporting you in doing yours. You are the policymakers, and my job is to make sure that you get the best data, the best evidence, and the best information from the actuaries so that you men and women can reach that precious consensus that everyone in America is trusting that you will.
Governor, thanks. I'm certain we'll rely on you and your input, not just in delivering better customer service, which of course is mission one here, as you assume you're confirmed, but I think we're going to need to be able to juggle at least a couple balls here and look over the long haul in getting your thoughts coming from the agency as well, because we're going to have to figure this out together.
Yes, sir.
To make this trust fund solvent and avoid this cliff that we're rapidly approaching. So, Governor, thank you for your thoughtful comments. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Carper.
Thanks. It's great to from one recovering governor to another recovering governor. Welcome to the Finance Committee. Thank you for your willingness to serve our country in yet another important role. I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. I'd been a state treasurer for a number of years. I was a naval flight officer before that. But I was elected to the Congress in 1982. And there are a bunch of us. I mean, I think that we had a freshman class of maybe 80, almost 100 people. A lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans. And the first week or so that we were in office, I think my recollection, we got on a train. I don't think we flew, but I think we got on a train, and we went to Harvard, all the newly elected House members. And the idea was to get to know each other. And the idea was to try to begin focusing on some of the big issues of the day. And one of the big issues of the day, there was a Social Security Trust Fund was running out of money. And one of the first issues that I worked on as a young House member was Social Security availability to make sure that it was going to be there for future generations. I have one of my favorite sayings is find out what works, do more of that. Mm. And as we revisit the same issue here, all these years later, that might be a good thing to do. Among the things that worked, we decided not to make it a partisan issue. We decided to make it a bipartisan issue. And there are Democrats and Republicans who stood up and said there's not one silver bullet. There's a lot of different things we have to do, need to do. And we did most of those. The key was leadership. We had leadership from the president at the time. We had strong leadership from Democrats and Republican leaders in the House and the Senate. We had great leadership on the committees of jurisdiction as well. So I'm delighted that the recovering governors and maybe a position to come back and help us address this issue again. We have a number of members of this committee, Democrat and Republican. One of the key members is a fellow from Louisiana, who's a doctor, but he's pretty good on these issues and not afraid to be courageous on these issues. So I would, with that having been said, I have a statement here that I just would rather talk from my heart. And sometimes I get in trouble doing that, but I'd rather talk from my heart. I'll ask you a question, though, that my staff was good enough to give me. But if confirmed, how do you plan to expand interagency coordination to improve the Social Security Administration's customer service and response times? As governor, you had a state pension. You had probably a bunch of pension plans in your state for state employees and others that you were sort of responsible for ultimately. And one of the things that I focused on as governor is trying to make sure that if somebody's calling our Division of Revenue about tax issues, that somebody got on the phone and helped them. Somebody was calling the pension office, state pension office, and had questions about somebody got on the phone and helped them, and we actually were very proactive. The record at the Social Security Administration for customer service was not good. My first question then would be, how do you plan to expand interagency coordination to improve Social Security Administration's customer service and response times?
Yes, Senator, thank you for your question. And the key is going to be to snap Social Security out of what it has been a long time-honored practice of contenting itself with annual accountability, like a budget, and the annual budget inputs. And instead, we have to get into a much faster velocity, a much more agile speed of bringing about the changes that we all know need to happen so that people get their phone calls answered and they get their face-to-face meetings when they need them. And if they are a member of their family or themselves is going through a disability determination, that they don't die waiting for it to be resolved if they have to appeal it. There's no single magic solution to that, but it has been my experience, both as a mayor and as a governor, that if you bring people together and we're clear about what the big goals are, it is amazing the way the leaders will rise when you start measuring yardage, when you have a compelling scoreboard that everybody can see. And it's really about big organizations learning from their own leaders. I mean, if you were to plot on a...
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. I have a couple of other questions. Let me just come. Have you ever heard the name Danny Werfel?
I have. You told me to meet with him, and I did.
Yeah, good. One, he's new. He's the new IRS commissioner, and one of the things he said right here where you're sitting, and we talked about the lousy service the IRS was providing.
It's getting better.
And about 2 years ago, you call a taxpayer called the IRS, or I think it was like a 13% chance that anybody get on the phone and actually take the call. Last year was about up to 87%. And a big part of it was leadership. And if confirmed, and I sure hope you will be, that you're in a great position to help provide that leadership. So I would just say, now, be strong, and I know you will be. I said, I'm a big believer in the golden rule: treat other people the way you want to be treated. And when people are calling, asking for help, I don't care if it's a postal issue, it's a Social Security issue, it's a tax issue, we got to help them. Okay. Second thing I want to mention is we have a propensity to send out improper payments from the federal government, improper payments. And I think GAO estimates now that there's about $247 billion with a B, in improper payments across the entire federal government for fiscal year 22, just for 1 year. 1 year. As elected officials, one of our most important responsibilities, of course, is to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. A couple of years ago, 2020, in fact, the Congress passed something called the Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased People Act, as a bill that Senator John Neely Kennedy and I partnered on. The law requires the Social Security Administration to share its full file of death information with the Do Not Pay working system for a 3-year period beginning December 23rd, 2023. That's this December 27th, 2023. And I would ask, you may not be able to answer this for the record, but if confirmed, will you commit to working with our staffs, not just Senator Kennedy and myself, but our staffs broadly, to ensure that the Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased People Act is implemented not overnight, not in a week or in a month, but in a timely way?
Yes, Senator, and I appreciate your leadership on that issue. Open, transparent, data shared by all.
Good, thank you. And if I think I have time to go for another one. Here we go. This deals with morale and employee retention at the Social Security Administration. Strengthening the federal workforce and retaining high-quality talent in federal agencies, big concern of mine, and I'm sure it will be of yours, or is of yours. It's critical that our federal workforce is well-trained. It's critical they be equipped to handle the challenges in the next decade and beyond. The Office of Personnel Management's Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey is conducted every year. It evaluates job satisfaction among federal workers, as you may know. In 2022, the Social Security Administration was ranked among the lowest federal agencies included in that survey, lowest. And my question would be, if confirmed, what do you think you would do? What would you be inclined to do from day one, maybe drawing on some of your earlier experience as governor, to improve morale among federal workers at the Social Security Administration and to enhance retention and recruitment efforts at that agency, please?
Senator, thank you. I look forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with and being among and with the hard men and women at the Social Security Administration. I have not had as many conversations as I will have if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed by this committee, but I am looking forward to actually listening to them. My sense is, from the people I've spoken to, is that it has been a long time since they've had leaders that would actually listen to what they're experiencing on the front lines and doing the work. That's why you have a record year in terms of new hires and at the same time a record year of attrition. People at SSA have historically really had a high sense of mission, high sense of purpose. The fact that they would sink to the lowest morale in the nation, I think, says a lot more about the lack of leadership there than it does about some sort of sea change or something in the water, among the employees. And so I'm looking forward to being an operational leader, to being among and with, and lifting up the leaders in the eyes of their peers, measuring performance so that that organization can learn from its highest performers. And when you do that, you create a winnable game for people. They want to come to work. They want to encourage their friends to apply to work there. And that's what we need to get back to. It won't happen overnight, but it does require leadership, and I promise you, Senator, I will throw myself into this challenge with 1,000% of what I've got.
Good. I'm sure you will. Mr. Chairman, I've known this man since he was like too young to get into O'Friel's Irish Pub in Wilmington, Delaware. And he was part of an Irish singing group, and that was actually quite extraordinary.
So you were in the pub?
And I was, checking IDs at the door. That's where we met. But ever since then, and from then till now, who would have thought we'd have travel these different paths, but we're glad your path has taken you here today, and delighted to support your nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. And Governor, let me give you a quick update. The update is you're getting close to the end. As you've seen, actually, I was going to say the chairman's on his way back. We've had senators going in and out voting, and it looks like we're getting to the end of that, but we have Senator Cassidy next, and then unless someone else shows up, Mr. Chairman,
I have
then
one last
you will have to.
question, and it'll be short. So have you recognized Senator Cassidy?
Not yet. Go ahead.
Oh, Senator Cassidy.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Malley, I enjoyed our meeting, so
thank you for making the time. I enjoyed it as well.
thank you for that. One of the issues that I've been concerned with is that after the pandemic, there's a lot of telework that continues, and it's unclear to me that there's processes in place by which people's activities are actually monitored, that their productivity is noted to be strong. I know that the labor unions want to continue telework, and I know that the Biden administration is trying to get people back to work. My office took a picture of another agency's, not yours, but another agency's parking lot on a Monday morning at 10, and you could cut wheelies in it. There was like no cars there. The American people, I think, are like looking at that, scratching their head and saying, is anything happening? And they're surmising not. What would be your attitude to continuing telework should you be appointed or not, or completed?
Yes, Senator, the litmus test for knowing when we've got the balance right is whether people can get their meetings face-to-face in the field offices and when they can get their phone calls answered. So we need to do a better job of staffing those field offices. People in public sector and private sector, because of the pandemic, have realized—
Now, let me ask, because staffing
Yes,
could
sir.
either mean hiring more people or asking people to actually show up there so that they're there to take the meeting.
Well, it's a combination of both. The field offices, as I understand it, people are required to be in those field offices.
Now, what about the D.C. office? Because that appears to be just speaking to the listening to the mayor of Washington, speaking to the administration. It's actually people actually showing up for work, physically showing up for work in D.C. that has become a real sticking point.
I have not spent a whole lot of time in the Washington office, Senator, to be able to tell you, but I can tell you, but I do know that in order to run a big organization like this, the people in the center of that circle have to be tight, they have to be talking every day, and it's really hard to do that if people aren't in.
Now, in our interview, in our conversation which we had, one thing I was impressed by is how you put online metrics when you were governor and mayor that would allow the people of Baltimore and the people of Maryland to actually see the performance of your various agencies. And you said, oh, you can't do this, and you did it, and it worked out very well. Would you commit, if you are confirmed, to developing metrics to make sure that anyone one, getting people back to work, but two, if they continue to telework, have metrics that would be posted online so that the people of the United States could actually see the metrics showing that people were actually doing work?
Yes, sir. That won't happen overnight, but that's what we're going to get to. I believe the first precept, first tenet of the system of performance management I was taught is timely, accurate information shared by all. That means all of us, not just managers, not just workers, but the people that pay for it, the people of the United States.
That would be good, because right now it seems as if it's unaccountable. And I feel like I'm channeling the people from Lake Charles, Louisiana,
Right.
or any other place in our state or our nation, where every time they don't get a phone call answered, they're wondering if somebody is on their couch watching soap operas.
Yeah, and it's tough. In your state, I mean, if you look at pre-pandemic, we've seen just on SSA staff in Louisiana a 24% reduction in staff. This isn't teleworking staff, just 24% fewer. And in the DDS determination, we've had some time here talking about that long process. You've seen a 20% reduction in your state's DDS office. So we've got a lot of work to do on morale, on accountability, on collaboration and coordination, hiring and retention. But at the end of the day, if we do a better job of serving customers, we're going to do a better job of holding our people.
Let me ask you this. SSA's own research has shown that if we change some of the terminology of how people refer to retirement, it would greatly increase retirement literacy, especially for those who are less educated, more vulnerable. For example, update the term early retirement to minimum benefit age, or normal retirement age with standard benefit age, and delayed retirement credit to maximum benefit age. Now, studies show this works.
Yeah.
We've asked SSA to, okay, let's do this, and they want $12 million to replace 9 words on their websites, even though these regularly undergo updates. So why do you need $12 million to do that which you regularly do? They also say that this may confuse Americans with the updated wording. Now, my wife just started taking Social Security, if I may hint at my wife's age. And that was our first time to really go on the website. So even if the people who are already on it, who I suspect never go to the website, would be confused, most Americans are yet to be on it. So I guess I'm asking you to go into this and ask questions. Why do you need $12 million to do that which you're already doing? Why don't we listen to our own studies? And why don't we benefit everybody who's going to be coming on? And ideally, we'd be choosing their maximum benefit age as opposed to something which is implied that they're going to get less. Are you with me on that?
I'm with you on it, Senator. I look forward to working with you on that. Sometimes we can do analysis to paralysis, and sometimes under the name of avoiding risk, we also avoid changes that would make a program a lot more effective. And if I may also say, I want to compliment you and what you and Senator Brown did with regard to SSI. It's in the weeds. Probably a lot of people don't appreciate it, but raising the asset limit so that people aren't penalized for saving, and also what that will do to remove the marriage penalty. I just want to compliment you for that, as well as for your thought leadership on solvency and the bipartisan spirit that you bring into those issues.
I thank you for that. Our goal is, by the way, all these questions are not to bust the chops of the guy that might be the SSA guy, Commissioner, but to try and make the program work better for our fellow Americans.
Right.
If we can do that, we've done our job. But thank you, I appreciate it. I yield.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy, and we've got to get your good bill passed, too, so we'll go to work on that. We're about at the end of the line here, Governor. I want to ask one other question about disability rights, because I remember when I ran the legal aid program for the senior citizens, the disability office was sort of right down the kind of corridor. And we've got 1.1 million people waiting for a decision on disability. Average wait time, 217 days. A lot of factors going on, but clearly staffing shortages is key. Now, the reason I'm asking this question is you're a smart guy and a management guy, and it looks to me like there's some resources right in front of us that we can move ahead with. For example, there is the State Disability Determination Service, where state employees can evaluate disability claims on behalf of SSA. Now, this looks like a perfect kind of federal state. Let's team up, just as you say, Martin O'Malley, Mr. Can-Do. Let's get this done. Now, Social Security covers the entire bill, but some states have been a little bit reluctant to hire additional staff to process claims or increase their salaries and benefits to make these positions more competitive. So how would you work with the governors? You were a governor. I've talked to a lot of these governors about you, and you got a lot of fans out there.
Well, thank you.
I think a good way to wrap this up is just to have you give us a sense of a partnership. Federal government, these governors, helping disabled people, putting more resources to it, chopping that 217 days down. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a big chunk of it. There are 50 different states with their own disability offices and the need to make those determinations. I would be picking up the phone and getting on the phone with other governors. Senator, you can send letters all you like, but we really need to elevate the focus on this in the eyes of governors. There's an adage that the things that get measured are the things that get done. But if the governors aren't seeing those measurements, I would wager to guess that there are many governors who have no idea whether their staffing is up or down in their state DDS offices. And we need to elevate it. We need to elevate the focus. We need to encourage and ask our governors to make it a higher priority. The other important aspect of this is people in the disability advocacy community and also people who for a living represent people when they are filing appeals. That's a wealth of information that can come back to improve this process, eliminate redundancies, and give people the justice and the help they deserve.
My last comment is something like 3 hours ago, I asked you about this matter of somebody I have the honor to represent at home in Albany, Oregon, and her being punished because her parents lent a helping hand to try to help her get by, and now she owes the government $9,000 in overpaid benefits, and you're going to help us. You said, hey, I'll stick to this timetable. We're going to come up with some plans. We're going to move ahead, and that's very welcome. And I just enjoyed listening to your passion for this issue, because the question I was most interested in was the first one. And we heard a little bit about that. Senators are senators. They show up, there's a microphone, they're going to ask about a lot of things. And you kept it to service. And that's really what the American people are looking for right now. I happen to think the best politics is good service. So if you want to be political, go off and give people some good service. And this is about people who worked their whole lives paying into Social Security. They earned these benefits, and they have a right to that. And you heard a lot of senators today talking about how important this issue is to them, and that's very welcome. We heard Democrats and Republicans talking about how important it is. And now we have a little bit of business that we've got to take care of. I want to notify members that we're going to hold the vote on the Rawlinson, Kazookas, and Newman nominations today during the 1 p.m. vote in room 219 in the Capitol. For members, with respect to, they may have written questions for you, Governor, for their participation. I thank them, and for the record, the written questions deadline will be Tuesday, November 7th at 5 p.m. But I think, Governor, what you've told us over the last 3 hours or so is exactly what public service needs more of. And I welcome that, and we look forward to working with you. And I guess your nomination started with me because we had the first call, and I guess we're wrapping it up together today. And I want the American people to know that I support your nomination. I support it strongly, and I think you're going to do a superb job. With that, the Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.